Let's start today from a point that's quite well known because we've repeated it many, many times. But somehow it's necessary, it's a starting point, what I wanted to share today. It's the fact that on one side we live what we see outside, the way we experience everything. We live it through ourselves, as we've said, through the filter of ourselves. And we have different aspects in our being. There's a there's a part that's more cognitive. There's a part that's more rational. What the one that tries to understand, to explain. The one that in our head is it's where we ask the why for things, where we ask for explanations, we give explanations, and then there's a part that is not necessarily incoherent with the rational part. That is not necessarily, it doesn't always match the rational part. There's sadness and joy and desire, aversion. They don't always go harmoniously with the rational part of ourselves. But these, let's say that these two parts try to support each other. But if we would set up a discussion, an argument between these two, who has the louder voice? Reason or 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 feelings? In my opinion, it's the feelings that have a louder voice. Unfortunately, we live in a time since a while where the middle way has gone out of style, and what happens is more and more it's a it's a binary reality. With you're on one side or on the other side. It's this or that. You are my friend or my enemy. You're with me or you're against me. And so what happens is even within it happens the same thing happens with the part of reason and the part of feelings. When feelings justify something to the rational part, um, one has to really find justifications. There's no middle way, and vice versa. And what happens in this process when we have strong feelings within that can be of any type, a feeling of abandonment, a feeling of fear, of anger, of dissatisfaction, attachment, of we're talking about the negative feelings. But on the other side, there's also faith and gratitude and love. There are many, many positive feelings as well. There's arrogance or humbleness, humility. But what we do is when we have strong feelings, we try, first of all, to find this inner harmony between the feeling and reason. And we try, from the side of our feelings, we try to convince our reason, our logic. And the reason, it's interesting because the part of reason is the part that somehow looks for some kind of coherence with the world, the surrounding world. It's not connected to, we use a wrong term, but maybe I explain myself better. We could say that feelings are more subjective and reason is more objective. Like I said, it's a wrong term, but maybe it gives a little bit more explanation because on the with the feelings is how I feel, and reason is how it is. It's like this, it's not like that. And reason looks for an external coherence. This happened like this, that happened like that, this is like this, that is like that, because this, that, and the other, tries to put things together in a coherence, following a certain logic and presuppositions, assumptions. Rarely have I seen a logical process that was not based on assumptions. These assumptions, just start with assumptions to then begin our logical process, our reasoning. Rarely have I seen someone um, follow a logical process without basing himself or herself on these assumptions. So we create this dialogue, this logic, trying to justify what we feel inside. And sometimes what happens is if we take um, um, if we take a thought and we start from an assumption, and on that basis we follow this thought, and it can be completely coherent, and then we take another assumption, and we follow that we follow that line of reasoning, and we'll get to a different result, maybe completely opposite, because we started from different assumptions. And so what happens is we try to justify our feelings with what's outside. We try to create, how can I say, an interpretation of reality that unfortunately we don't live it as an interpretation, but we see it as the only reality that exists, that somehow looks for a kind of harmony, even if that's not the right term, a kind of justification for what we feel. And so it's as if it's a kind of mechanism of self-defense. I have feelings and I want somehow to protect them, so I create a reality that justifies those feelings that I'm living. For example, sometimes it happens that I have a feeling of insecurity, a feeling of fear, uncertainty, insecurity, things that I don't want to have. And so what do I do to try to counter oppose those feelings of uncertainty and insecurity? I try to say, no, it's not like that. I try to justify them and create a different a different feeling. And here often arrogance comes out, this pride in the sense of feeling superior to others. It's not a it's not a manifestation of having many qualities. It's a manifestation of a deep sense of insecurity. Because if I'm sure of myself, I don't need to compare myself to others. I don't need to put myself in a position of being better than you. I am what I am, and I feel good with what I am. I'm able to see what you have, what you don't have, but one thing is one thing, another is another, and I'm fine in myself. But when I see the other as a threat, I feel insecure in front of this person. At that point, I need to protect myself. I need to put myself in a situation where I am better than you. For example, I mean, this happens also in religious contexts. I've seen, unfortunately, many times that when we have two people from two different religions, then it happens that the two people are very sure of their own paths, their own religion. They're very sure of their path. They're proud of what of their path, and they're sure about what they're doing. And normally they have no problem being with others, or and they don't see others as a threat because they are fine where they are. When instead I'm un, I'm unsure about my path and my religious choice, etc. One, I try to hide that insecurity from myself, and number two, to protect myself because I feel insecure. I try to create distance, so I don't want to listen to others. I don't want to come into contact with what is different, because what is different is a threat to me, because I'm not sure of myself. Is that clear? For me, it's interesting um, how some feelings like arrogance, they're symptoms of deeper things. They're symptoms of ignorance. They're symptoms of a feeling of suffering, of uncertainty, of weakness, that then afterwards one shows, one manifests that, trying to overwhelm, push down others because one doesn't feel sure of oneself. When within Buddhist teachings, there's a part that I think is very important. They're called the five wisdoms. The five wisdoms, they're so important that they're they're actual embodiments of these five wisdoms, which are the five Dhyani Buddhas. And in so many contexts, we talk about the five wisdoms. In so many different times, we talk about the five wisdoms. But these things are so important, and they're talked about so much. It's almost almost as if at a certain point we give importance to the symbol and we forget about the meaning. We forget to bring it to our daily lives. And today I wanted to talk about two of these five wisdoms, and try to deepen them a little bit, because in my opinion they're very, very important. The first the first one, it makes reference to the family of Buddha Ratnasambhava, which is the wisdom of equanimity and the wisdom of correct discernment of Buddha Amitabha. It's almost as if one isn't complete without the other. They support each other, they complement each other. And there are two characteristics that are fundamental for us to have a coherent view of the world in front of any situation. And I was thinking about that there's a very clear correlation between the mental defilements of these Dhyani Buddhas and the wisdom that has yet to be developed. So let's start with Buddha Ratnasambhava. So there's miserliness, but there's primarily arrogance. As we said before, arrogance is a self-defense mechanism. One has that inner feeling of uncertainty, because let's remember as well that whoever feels superior to someone else, they feel inferior to someone else. I've never seen someone who has this strong sense of superiority that doesn't have a strong sense of inferiority somewhere else. Because if I feel superior, it means that I see myself through a comparison to other. And if I use others to see myself, I compare myself, then I'll see myself as more beautiful or less beautiful, more intelligent or less intelligent. And naturally, this is what we would do. But let's remember that once again, that often arrogance is a manifestation of a kind of fear and uncertainty, a defense mechanism. On the other side, as an antidote, we have the wisdom of equanimity. The wisdom of equanimity, of the basis, what we are today. Let's remember that all various qualities that we talk about, there's no quality that a Buddha, there's no quality that a Buddha has that doesn't correspond to a quality that we don't have in our actual state of being now. So when we're able, our equanimity of the basis is our ability to see the similarities between two things, like even simple things like a glass. One is yellow, one is blue, but I see them both, even if they're different colors, but they're both glasses. That's the wisdom of equanimity, being able to see similarities, put this ability to put things in the same category, to say this and that, they have something in common and they are in the same group. What happens with arrogance? To uphold itself, arrogance needs to create differences and distance, detachment. If I'm better than you, I am not the same as you. I'm not going to put myself at the same level as you. And when there's a strong arrogance, you can see it in very, very simple things, almost like it's sad, but we could say it's like almost a comedy sometimes, make you laugh, even though it can make you cry too. For example, I'm better than you. I can't sit in the same place as you. I can't eat with you. I can't share the same things with you because I'm better than you. So once I feel superior to you, it means that I'm not the same as you. To seeing that I'm the same as you means taking away a good part of that basis of this sense of superiority, this distance, this detachment. I don't know if this is clear. And so, one point, an antidote is the wisdom of equanimity, putting together, putting put things on the table clearly without fear that takes something away from us. To be able to say things, to put clearly what the similarities are. What do we have in common? We all want to be happy. No one wants to suffer. We're human beings. And we can go on and on. And what's really interesting on one side, how can I say, is that often it's easier to accept someone who is very different than accept someone who is very similar but still different. I don't know if that's clear to you. Yes? No? For example, it's easier to accept someone who has a worldview and a different religion than my own than accept someone who has a very similar worldview but has one aspect that's different. Almost like that small difference were a threat to me more than someone who has a completely different worldview. And for this reason, sometimes seeing similarities is difficult if I want to keep this distance between us. For example, things that create similarities that create um, this feeling of being closeness, feeling of closeness. If we're in a hospital, whether we're sick ourselves or we're accompanying someone who's sick. I mean, it works in both cases. Let's say that we're bringing someone who's sick and we're in the waiting room and I see someone that I don't know. There's no connection, and he also is waiting for someone who has a similar problem as the person that I've brought to the hospital. Maybe they have problems with their blood or they've broken their arms, whatever it is. If we're next to someone who's suffering for the same reason that we're suffering, this creates closeness because we see each other as being similar. When we see someone similar, it means that we see ourselves in others. And then naturally we develop affection, closeness, because we're so selfish that when we see ourselves in others, we're attracted to others. More or less, it's like this. It works in a positive way. But our mechanism is like this. When we see ourselves in others, we create closeness with that person. And what happens if I don't want to be close to that person? I will do everything possible to say, I am not like you. Why? Because I don't want to see myself in you. I don't want to feel something positive for you. One of the greatest offenses, one of the greatest offenses would be to say you are like this person that you have a great aversion for. Wisdom of equanimity instead is clearly stating similarities, allowing ourselves to see these points clearly. And the more aversion we have, arrogance we have, hatred we have, then that our wisdom of equanimity is more and more ignorant. We try not to see the similarities. So here it's really it's important to be, how can I say, to be as intellectually sincere as possible. I don't know if this concept is clear, because as much as the feelings ask for help from reason, reason says, "Well, I can't go that far because we're really different. I understand that there's anger and etc. But look, this, that, and the other. Here we're in the same situation." For this sincerity, this intellectual sincerity, this ability of ours to be able to see things clearly without being overwhelmed by our emotions that take us one side or another. Doing this without blocking our emotions, accepting the emotions, but one thing is one thing, another thing is another. On the other side, together, we have this part of unlimited attachment, unlimited desire that goes together with the wisdom of discernment. What is one of the characteristics, when we have a strong attachment towards something, what happens? Let me give you an example. When we have an enormous amount of attachment towards an object, a situation, a person, towards something, and someone comes to us and talks about some characteristic that is not favorable, what do we do? Yes, but that's nothing. It's not really like that. We try to minimize that thing. What we do when we have a strong attachment, we generalize. Even when there's a strong aversion too, we take that part of the whole that we see and we generalize everything else through that view of attachment or aversion. Let me give you an example. Let's say that we're watching a movie, and in this movie, there's music, there are images, there's a plot, there are dialogue, the way the actors how the actors are acting. Um, and let's say I really like the plot of the movie because I like the narrative behind this movie. So I said, "Oh, it's a beautiful movie." And then someone next to us says, "Oh, but the music is horrible." No, 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 it's a beautiful movie. Don't tell me that it's not a good movie. But one doesn't take away anything from the other. I mean, the plot can be wonderful and the music terrible. One thing doesn't take away from the other. We have this tendency instead to generalize. There's a movie that I saw once, for example. I left that movie absolutely disgusted, and I even went to the premiere of that movie. Something that I did very rarely in my life, and I was together with Geshe Pende, Lama Lawan. I remember I was feeling so ashamed. It was a horrible, horrible movie, and we're not here to review movies, but the images were absolutely beautiful. So I remember that the that the scenes were beautiful, but the message of the movie, the actual plot was horrible. The film's name is Spring, Summer, Fall, Winter, and Spring Again. It's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Um, um, One of the worst movies I've ever seen. They say it was a Buddhist film, but I'm not sure where it was a Buddhist movie. They really gave the wrong ideas of Buddhism. So excuse my criticism. I try not to criticize anything, um, but but I have to say that the images of the movie was absolutely beautiful. This lake and the temple in the middle of this lake, but I didn't like the movie. When I say it's an ugly movie, that's my own perception. Maybe someone else loved it. That's the beauty of a relative world. But what happens? For me, I say it's a horrible movie. And someone says, no, 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 it's a beautiful movie. No, it's bad. It's good. It's bad. It's good. If we get into details and we say, let's put all the cards on the table. The cinematography, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. The actors, I don't think actors were good. In your opinion, yeah, you're right. They weren't great. What about the dialogue? Let's look about the plot. Let's look at the plot, the message, the philosophical coherence. And if we put all the cards on the table, we would probably agree. But you give emphasis to the cinematography and you highlight that, and I'm giving emphasis to the lack of religious coherence, and so I generalize through that point. So both in attraction and in aversion, we have this tendency to generalize things, which is a sign of ignorance. But why do we generalize something? Because we want to justify the attraction and the aversion that we feel. So again, we have reason that tries to hold up the feelings. I have attachment, I have attraction. I need to justify that. So I then generalize that object through those characteristics, and I give a name. That thing is good, it's beautiful, generalizing its whole. The whole of the object. On the other side, if there's a strong aversion, to justify that feeling, we generalize the object too. And what happens if we have a strong object of aversion? Let's say it's a person for whom we have a strong feeling of aversion. Someone comes to us to speak well of a quality of theirs. Do we listen to that quality in a neutral way, or do we try to minimize it, saying that it's not true? We see that quality as a threat to our position, to our truth. Because if I have aversion and you're bad and horrible, you can't have qualities. I can't see those qualities. Even if I see those qualities, the classic phrase is, it's true, but even I've repeated this a couple times, this phrase I've heard, anything that comes before but is bullshit. I heard it in English. So anything that comes from but is worthless. And that's true. So if I have strong aversion for someone and someone comes to talk about something positive about that person, and I say, it's true, but look, this person did this, that, and the other. So with that but, I am minimizing that quality, and I'm going back to that generalization that that person is a bad person. In the same way, if that person is a strong object of attraction and someone speaks ill of that person, I say, oh yes, it's true that that person did that stupid thing, but look how beautiful he is, and the wonderful things he does here and there. Right? I mean, we do this, don't we? So in these two cases, what we're lacking is more discernment. The wisdom of discernment is this ability to recognize specific characteristics of everything. One thing is one thing, another thing is another thing, and it's the opposite of generalization. So let's remember that generalization is not equanimity. Okay? But the opposite of generalization, I see. So if there's a person, I try to see the various characteristics. Let's take the example of the movie and the generalization. It's a bad movie. The correct discernments would be to look at the aspects. The cinematography is beautiful in general. How this scene, that scene. I can go into more details. Given that the majority of these scenes were beautiful, I say that the cinematography was beautiful, but I can get into more detail. At the same time, there's music. So how is the music beautiful? I get into more and more details. And I see everything with its name, everything in detail, with this intellectual sincerity, which is very important. So I give names to things. I try to have coherence. And something that's important is, or one important thing is that this attitude, generalizing things and not seeing specifics of something, the aspects of something, is the basis for upholding unlimited desire, dissatisfaction, and even its opposite, aversion. It's very interesting to see how unlimited desire and aversion, very often, they're like two sides of the same coin. It's particular. This isn't the subject of today. You can see this in a kind of morose relationship between people. You can see this very often. The hate that one feels towards one and the desire that one feels for that same person. They're two manifestations of the same thing, but this is not the subject of today. What happens is when we have this strong attachment, this strong aversion, etc., and other feelings too, we have the tendency to generalize. And let's remember, this generalization is a way that we have to try to justify a feeling of anger, of attachment, of fear, of jealousy, of envy, etc., etc., of abandonment, of loneliness. So, one solution, an antidote that's very useful is correct discernment, which is the opposite of generalization. If we try to oppose this generalization, this just in itself helps take away the basis for many unhealthy feelings. So normally conflicts are based on these unhealthy feelings. And within these unhealthy feelings, we have this feeling of abandonment, insecurity, this sense of fear, anger, hate, resentment, sadness, attachment, unlimited desire, dissatisfaction, different feelings that are at the basis of a conflict. But if we're on two opposite ends and I generalize on my side and you generalize on your side, from your view, and both of us, we take away the equanimity and that we don't want to see anything in common, this is a perfect recipe for a long-term conflict. And we all have conflicts in our lives. It's one of the keys to having a more balanced life, a more coherent life, is to put the cards on the table, to see things with a certain sincerity and coherence. And this requires these two attitudes, equanimity and discernment. I see the various characteristics of something. For example, it's happened to me a couple times to say something in a given situation, and then people would come and say, how is it possible? In the same sentence you say, you contradict yourself. So you're saying both yes and no in this sentence. And sometimes it's true. On one side it can be true, but reality is complex. Things are never white or black or white. Very often they're not. Very often there are more possibilities, more aspects. It depends. And what we do really depends on many factors. If this needs to be like this and that needs to be like that. And so for me, what I try to do when faced in a situation is to put on the table all the cards and then see all the combinations that we can choose, but the possibilities are many. And so the more we're able to see similarities, recognize similarities, this creates closeness. This takes away the distance between us. And let's remember that one way of self-protection that we have is arrogance. There's a religious arrogance, there's a racial arrogance, there's a national arrogance, there's an arrogance as one's own identity, related to one's identity in general. And normally it happens that when someone is in a situation, as I said before, where one feels threatened, he tries to defend himself, and in this defense, one tries to create distance from those he sees as a threat. I say something that might be a little strong. For example, the Tibetan people, I'm talking about my own personal experience without generalization. From my perception, I've seen that it's a reality that has many threats, where one's own identity, one's own religion was strongly threatened for a long period of time, and at the same time it's a people that has a very strong identity. In Italy, we say, the people, the mountain people are more stubborn. What would you say about someone who was born at 4,500 meters? So a reality that is a reality that has less contact with others. Where in Tibet, for example, to go from one village to another, you have to go all the way down the mountain, go back up the mountain. So very closed. Luckily, they were able to maintain and protect Buddhist teachings for centuries and centuries. But there is also an attitude. I see it changing lately. But at the beginning, when I got close to Buddhism, when I lived in India, this was very clear to me. This idea that someone who's not Tibetan could never reach enlightenment. I mean, someone who's not Tibetan could never really practice Buddha Dharma well. Sorry if I say it in these words. Surely someone might feel a little offended. And as I said, this was a perception that I had. I'm not saying this is true, but it's a perception that came from certain events that had happened in the last 25 years. It has changed a lot. I don't see it like this anymore. But what happens here? I try to protect my identity, so I set myself as superior compared to others. But we all do this. And when we see a conflict, we try to find the defects in others. Even if maybe we have those same characteristics, we don't care about that. We're just focused on how it's not good that it's in the other person. So I repeat again that if we put effort into starting from our own life and where we are, and towards things that we judge, things that we see, because something that worries me a bit is I see that we often have this attitude to take for granted the information that we receive and we let ourselves be overwhelmed by strong senses of song, a sense of attraction and aversion and judgment, and in areas that we're very ignorant in too. I don't know if this is clear. For example, if there's a conflict between two sides, and I want to understand that conflict, what should I do? Talk to one person or talk to both sides? Probably, if I listen to just one person, I have a clear idea of what the conflict is about. And then when I hear the other side, I don't have a clear idea about what the conflict's about because each one has a different view, and this is the beauty. We need to get to a coherent and balanced view, because when there's a conflict between two sides, what's the tendency of each side? To take away that equanimity and generalize things. So we will have two polarized views. And if it's not like this, it's not a conflict. And if I am not part of the conflict, if I want to have a coherent view of the conflict, I need to try to understand as deeply as possibly, with as much neutrality, one side and as well as the other. And very often there are more sides, there are many sides. There's 360 degrees. We need to go around this reality and see the various aspects. And it's in this way, little by little, we can have a more complete view. I don't want to talk about geopolitical conflicts and these wide scale conflicts. Of course, it's important to study history, to have a complete view of what's going on before saying that this is this and that is that, before getting ourselves into a game of attraction and aversion. But but I mean here that we need to apply this to our daily lives, because in our daily lives there are conflicts, aren't there? In a family, at work, among friends, in a community, and regardless of the context, there are conflicts. And here is where we need to be careful to see things as much as possible with coherence, where one thing is one thing, another thing is another thing. See similarities, see the differences, look clearly at the situation, equanimity and discernment together. Okay? And in this process, just remember that we need to be careful not to generalize and to not justify our feelings, but at the same time, we can't even negate the existence of those feelings and not accept them. Feelings need to be seen and accepted, need to be taken care of. Keeping an intellectual sincerity and coherence, equanimity and correct discernment at the same time. Okay? It's time for our dedications.
Drove munsel tatu ne gyurchi kewa kuntu yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela longche chi sadan lamge yente rabzone dorje change kopa nyurtobe sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delek shi ninsen taktu delek pe Concho sumki chingi lob, concho sumki ngodrubutsol, concho sumki tashi shun. Shide simcho rinpoche ma ke panama ke gyurchi ke pa nyambra me pa yang kongne konto pelwar shon. Possa la preziosa mente pacifica
May the precious mind of peace that has not yet arisen,
non
may it
degenerare e
arise.
crescere sempre di più.
May it arise, and
All'alba o al tramonto, di notte o durante il
the mind of
giorno,
peace that
possano i
has
pregi
already
divini
arisen, may it
concederci le loro
continue,
benedizioni,
um,
possano
continue
aiutarci a
and
ottenere
strengthen
tutte le
forevermore.
realizzazioni
At dawn or at dusk, at
nel
night or
sentiero della
midday,
nostra
may
vita
the three
o
jewels grant us
beneficenza.
their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Trascidele, buon
Trashidele, have a good day, everyone.